The film starts by introducing Mason, who currently juggles part-time work as a lawyer. In the beginning scenes, he's absorbed in an old photograph from his days as a member of the United States Special Forces. Before venturing into law part-time, Mason was a highly skilled soldier in the Special Forces. Since childhood, he harbored a strong passion for combat, always standing up for his less strong friends. This dedication eventually led him to undergo military training in the United States and later become selected for the Special Forces team. One particular day, Mason received a mission to eliminate the president of Polonia, an African nation predominantly inhabited by Latin people. The president in question was notorious for treating his own citizens harshly. As Mason was en route to Polonia, the helicopter carrying him and his team came under attack from the forces loyal to the Polonia president. It was a terrible incident, resulting in the loss of some of Mason's comrades. Fortunately, Mason survived and returned home, but the experience left him traumatized. He eventually decided to leave the military and has been working as a part-time lawyer since. After a moment of reflecting on his past, Mason swiftly heads out to drop off his daughter at school. During the ride, his daughter mentions that one of her friends is bothering her. Mason suggests she stand up for herself, even jokingly proposing she could use a playful tactic to make her friend think twice. After dropping off his daughter, Mason heads to his office, where he receives an unexpected visit from his former military leader, Sebastian. Sebastian explains that he wants Mason to accompany an American journalist on a mission. Initially hesitant due to his desire to distance himself from weapons and combat, Mason is tempted by Sebastian's offer of a generous salary, especially when he mentions that the assignment will take place in Polonia. Sebastian emphasizes that Mason's sole responsibility will be escorting the journalist Clara, who is set to interview Polonia's ruthless president. Sebastian chose Mason for this task due to his past experience in Polonia, even though it didn't go smoothly. Mason requests some time to ponder over it and assures Sebastian he'll convey his decision the following day. After a little while, Mason heads to pick up his daughter from school. To his surprise, he finds his wife Rebecca there. The school had contacted her because their daughter had used a rock to defend herself against a bothersome classmate, resulting in the injured child having to go to the hospital. Their daughter admitted she did it because her dad, Mason, had suggested it. This deeply upsets Rebecca because Mason had imparted the wrong advice. Adding to their predicament, they now have to cover the hospital bills for the injured child and pay a fine to the school. Sadly, Rebecca doesn't know how to come up with all that money as Mason hadn't provided her with any funds for several months, given his role as a part-time lawyer. Feeling guilty about the situation, Mason discusses with Rebecca whether he should accept Sebastian's mission. He explains that the mission would provide them with a substantial amount of money to cover all their losses. Initially, Rebecca expresses concern about Mason embarking on the mission, fearing he might not return. However, she also realizes that their family is facing financial challenges and doesn't have many options. In the end, she grants Mason permission to go. A bit later, Mason reaches out to Sebastian, letting him know he's ready to embark on the mission immediately. Sebastian then requests Mason to meet the journalist, Clara, he'll be escorting, conveniently located at his office. Mason connects with Clara, wasting no time informing her that Sebastian has sent him to accompany her for an interview with President George Venegas in Polonia. Mason and Clara set off for Polonia to meet President Venegas. Mason remains cautious, keeping his distance from Venegas, concerned that he might set a trap for them. After a welcoming reception, Venegas takes Mason and Clara to the state palace for the interview. However, on the way, they are suddenly attacked by an unidentified military group. Mason promptly fights back, successfully overcoming all the attackers. Initially suspicious that Venegas might be behind the attack, Venegas swears that those weren't his people and that they seemed to be after him as well. Venegas shared that he had been facing sudden attacks from unidentified forces for the past few months. He aimed to be interviewed by Claire to draw international media attention to this issue. Despite Venegas's explanation, Mason still had reservations about trusting him. Therefore, he decided to leave with Claire. During their journey, Mason contacted Sebastian, requesting a rescue helicopter due to the recent attack by an unknown military group. Upon hearing this, Sebastian asked Mason to send their current location, assuring him that a rescue helicopter would be dispatched within 20 minutes. As promised, a helicopter approached 20 minutes later. However, to their surprise, it wasn't the one Sebastian had sent, it was from the enemy group still pursuing them. Recognizing the danger, Mason swiftly grabbed Clara, and they made a run for it, leading to a chase and a shootout in the forest. Whenever he had the opportunity, Mason attempted to shoot down the pursuing helicopter, successfully bringing it down. After the helicopter was destroyed, 2 remaining enemy troops had them cornered. Initially feeling trapped, they were surprised when Venegas appeared and took out the attackers. Mason began to realize that the military group wasn't operating under Venegas's orders. So, he and Claire decided to team up with him. Later on, Venegas extended an invitation for Mason and Claire to take a break in a nearby village, which turned out to be his hometown. On a different note, a mercenary named Mike received a call from a mysterious man, instructing him to track down Venegas, as well as Mason and Clara. As Venegas, Mason, and Clara arrived in Venegas's hometown, they were warmly welcomed by all the villagers. The village chief, a childhood friend of Venegas, expressed his gratitude towards him. Following a decision to freshen up, they faced a minor challenge. No towels were available, so they had to leave without using any. A few hours later, Clara prepared to interview Venegas using Mason's mobile phone, and all the villagers gathered to watch. During the interview, Claire inquired why Venegas had a reputation for being harsh to his people. Venegas explained that it was all lies and slander, pointing out the villagers' love and support for him. Venegas mentioned the valuable resource called Lannis in the country, and major world powers were eager to obtain it. This constant accusation of harsh rule stemmed from those major powers wanting to overthrow the Polonia government to access the Lannis material. However, Venegas was determined not to let that happen and vowed to protect his country at all costs. The villagers cheered in support, and even Mason started to wholeheartedly believe in Venegas. After the interview, they all decided to stay in the village. Clara and Mason found themselves sharing a room, and due to Mason's muscular physique, she made a move on him. However, Mason respectfully turned down her advances, his thoughts centered on his family eagerly awaiting him back home. The following day, Mason approached Venegas to inquire about the instigator behind the persistent attacks on him. Venegas suggested Mason direct this question to the person who had initially assigned him this mission. Promptly, Mason reached out to Sebastian, as he was the one who had tasked him with accompanying Clara. In their conversation, Sebastian revealed that he deliberately chose Mason to safeguard Clara, foreseeing numerous attacks. He explained that if he had selected another guard, Clara might not have made it this far. Mason then pressed for information about the military forces responsible for the attacks. Sebastian clarified that the orchestrated assaults were the work of major world powers within the African Union. Their objective was to overthrow the Polonia government by eliminating Venegas. Additionally, the African Union had joined forces with Venegas's nephew, George Mendez, who served as the vice president, aiming to remove Venegas from power. Upon learning this, Mason finally realized Venegas's innocence, and now, he was determined to protect him as well. Shortly after this revelation, a group of mercenaries led by Mike suddenly appeared in the village. Mike had been enlisted by the African Union to locate Venegas. Immediately, he took the village chief hostage, pressuring him to reveal Venegas's whereabouts. To prevent harm to the village chief, Venegas surrendered under the condition that everyone else in the village would remain safe. However, just as Mike was on the verge of taking Venegas, Mason and Clara arrived on horseback, staging a rescue for Venegas. A chase ensued, leading to Clara's capture while Mason and Venegas continued running to evade Mike. After venturing deep into the forest, Venegas began sharing a past incident with Mason. It involved a helicopter from the American Special Forces that had been shot down by African Union mercenaries in this very forest area. Realizing that the American Special Forces mentioned by Venegas were actually his own troops, Mason comprehended that the attackers were African Union mercenaries and not Venegas's people. Filled with guilt, Mason struggled to find the words to express how sorry he was for misjudging Venegas as a villain. Venegas then suggested to Mason that he would be willing to exchange himself for Clara since she had no connection to their country's conflict. Following this, Venegas took Mason to his friend Smith's house. Upon reaching Smith's house, Venegas sought Smith's help in facilitating the exchange between himself and Claire, who was still held captive by Mike's group. Without hesitation, Smith readily agreed to assist Venegas. The following day, they observed that Mike was holding Claire hostage, awaiting Venegas. Surprisingly, Smith led the villagers in a protest right in front of Mike's forces, causing a commotion and diverting their attention. Amidst the chaos, Venegas successfully freed Clara and planned to take her to the presidential palace. Before departing, he extended an invitation to Mason, urging him to join because he intended to go live from the presidential palace to share the real story with the world. On the other hand, Venegas's nephew, Mendez, relaxed in the presidential palace, assuming Venegas had already been killed. Unexpectedly, Venegas arrived with Claire and Mason just as the treacherous commander of the Polonia forces showed up, attempting to attack Venegas, leading to a shootout. Ultimately, Venegas overcame the commander, and Mendez was fatally shot. Shortly after, more soldiers arrived, aiming their weapons at their own president, Venegas. These soldiers believed that Venegas had killed Mendez and the commander. Venegas detailed the entire sequence of events, and his narrative found support in video recordings on Clara's phone. This effectively convinced the soldiers that he was telling the truth. A few moments later, Mike and his mercenaries launched a sudden attack on the presidential palace, igniting a fierce battle between the African Union mercenaries and the Polonia forces. Amidst the chaos of the fight, Mason found himself in a challenging situation with Mike. Fortunately, Claire came to Mason's rescue, and his decisive actions were broadcast live on Clara's phone. After some time, Mason and the Polonia forces received assistance from Sebastian and his troops, ultimately defeating Mike's forces. Several days later, the truth about President Venegas of Polonia was broadcast on international TV channels. The world now recognized Venegas, the president of Polonia, as a genuinely good person who had been falsely accused by greedy individuals seeking to exploit the country's natural resources. On the home front, Rebecca, witnessing her husband's heroic actions on TV, felt an immense sense of pride in Mason, the part-time lawyer who had saved an entire nation. The next day, Mason finally returned home, receiving a warm hug from Rebecca. Additionally, he received uplifting news from Sebastian, who had sent Mason a mission payment of $5 million. Learning this, Rebecca was thrilled, knowing that financial worries were now a thing of the past. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.